अभी भी स्पेशल वीडियो बना रहे हैं। अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड वेलकम बैक टू यूके लाइव विद शहजाद। तो जी हाँ, उम्मीद करता हूँ कि आप लोग सब खैरियत से होंगे और आपकी दुआओं से हमेशा की तरह मैं भी ठीक ठाक हूँ। और आज का व्लॉग शुरू करते हैं जी। आज हम फिर एक दफ़ा जा रहे हैं जी अल मुस्तफ़ा सेंटर, जहाँ पे आज फिर माशाल्लाह नात ख़वानी का प्रोग्राम हो रहा है मस्जिद में। और इंशाल्लाह अभी थोड़ी देर के बाद हम मस्जिद जाएंगे। तो वीडियो को आखिर तक ज़रूर देखें और वीडियो को लाइक और शेयर ज़रूर करना है और चैनल को सब्सक्राइब भी ज़रूर करें। तो इंशाल्लाह मिलते हैं आपसे कुछ देर बाद मस्जिद में।
A few moments later.
मिकाईल माला उनको दावत देता हूँ कि आप स्टेज पर तशरीफ लाएं और तलावत कुरान मजीद फुरकान हमीद फरमाएं। और अल्लाह करीम इन जवानों ने दुआ करे अगर वो लोगों ने बच्चे पब्बा कलम्बा फिरने। ये देखो कितना सोहना जवान बच्चा है जी, पूरी दुनिया दे जाके सरकार ने कलाम पढ़ना। अल्लाह ताला इनके सोजो गदाज में और बरकत नसीब फरमाए। नारे तकबीर। मैं जरा तुहानू आखिया सी जरा जरा मोहब्बत देनी है घर। नारे तकबीर, नारे रिसालत, अज़मत व शान मुस्तफा जिंदाबाद, अज़मत कुरान जिंदाबाद।
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات سبحان الله كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا. قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا. قل إنما فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة لك ذكرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا.
मौलाना उमर फारूक साहब को इंग्लिश में खिताब के लिए दावत देता हूँ कि आप स्टेज पर तशरीफ़ लाएँ और जनाब रसालत माब सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की बारगाह में आपने हाज़िरी लगवाएँ। प्यार भरा नारा, नारा तकबीर, नारा रिसालत, नारा हैदरी, जश्न ईद मिलादुन नबी।
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह रब्बिल आलमीन व अफ़ज़लुस सलाति व अतम्मुत तस्लीम अला सय्यिदिना व मौलाना मुहम्मद खातमिल अंबिया व इमामिल मुरसलीन व अला आलिहि अत्तय्यिबीन अत्ताहिरीन وصحابته غر المحجلين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد. صدق الله العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. أما بعد. On this occasion of the Mawlid al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there's many aspects and many qualities that we can talk about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The qualities, the perfections, the beauties of Rasulullah alayhi salam are many. We hear about them every year. On every occasion of Mawlid al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we hear the same repeated things. Now, before I go into the ayat of Surah Al-Kahf that are recited in my khutbah, there are a few things which in particularly the youngsters and the English speaking audience should be aware of and should have knowledge of. It's important to understand, growing up in the societies that we grew up in, surrounded by the people that we are surrounded by, it's important to know and have basic understanding and knowledge of why we celebrate the Mawlid and what are our reasons for celebrating the Mawlid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. growing up in the schools, going through the college system, through university, at work, there are always people who say the same objections. This is a bid'ah, this is an innovation, this did not happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, which okay, is fine. But it's important for us as youngsters, as Ahl Sunnah, for our own confidence, our own understanding, to know these things, so that we can teach our children when they grow up. When our children come home from school, after the learning whatever they learn in the school system, and come home and say, Mom, Dad, why do we celebrate the Mawlid? The Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, the Sahaba didn't do it. My friend at school said we shouldn't celebrate the Mawlid. What answer are we going to have? We need to be able to answer these questions and remove these doubts from not only our minds, but the minds of our kids who are growing up in this country. There is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which tells us, mentioned in Sahih Muslim, which tells us that there is such thing as good practices being introduced into the religion of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasanatan, that whoever introduces sunnah hasana, a good practice into Islam, فَيُعْمَلُ بِهَا بَعْدَهُ, and then after that person, that same practice is acted upon, that same practice is performed by those people who come after him, فَلَهُ أَجْرُهَا, then for that person who introduced that deed, he will get the reward of that deed. وَأَجْرُ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِهَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يُنْقَصَ مِنْ أُجُورِهِمْ شَيْءٍ. He will receive the reward of that action, and he will also receive the reward for those people who act upon it after him. Now if we look at the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, as long as there are permissible actions taking place, as long as there are good things being performed in the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, then there's no reason to say that this is impermissible. In a proper Mawlidun Nabi gathering, what do we listen to? We start with the recitation of the Quran. Tell me, which man, when Sayyidina Qatada radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was injured in the battle. His eye was injured to such a degree that it was hanging out of its socket. His eye was hanging out of his socket, just holding on by one vein. The famous narration that talks about the eye of Qatada. Sayyidina Qatada, he came to the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine that. Someone has just come from battle. His eye is out of its socket, hanging down. And he comes to the Prophet ﷺ saying, Ya Rasulullah, look at my eye. Look what's happened to my eye. The Prophet ﷺ did not say anything. The Prophet ﷺ, with their blessed hand, took hold of the eye of Sayyidina Qatada, placed it back in the socket of Sayyidina Qatada. And Qatada himself says that when the Prophet ﷺ touched my eye, I could see better in that eye than how I could see before. SubhanAllah. Because of the touch of the Prophet ﷺ. So there's many other narrations, many other places in the Quran where we can understand this from. So yes, to conclude, the Rasul is Bashar. The Rasul is a man. Why? Because he was sent to mankind. Especially the youngsters, you need to understand this, you need to get this in your mind. When people say that the Prophet ﷺ is a man, he's just any old man, he's a man like me and you, he's like our older brother, that is complete disrespect of the Prophet ﷺ. So he is Bashar because he was sent to man. But if we look at all of these different narrations, and there's countless number of these narrations, think to yourself, don't listen to what people are telling you, think to yourself, how can anyone compare to the Prophet ﷺ? No one from the entire creation of God comes close to the dust on the feet of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah created the Prophet ﷺ in a special way. And our iman, our faith as Muslims, which we can't let go, is only complete with the love of the Rasul ﷺ. These are things that you hear all the time, but it's important to be reminded, important to remember. When we are so distracted with technology, with work, with daily life, these are things that we forget. at the signs of loving the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. For example, following his actions. Following his actions, basic things like praying 5 times a day. If you take anything from this Mawlid gathering, then it's don't let this Mawlid gathering be a means of you going to sleep late and then missing Fajr. That defeats the entire purpose. Remember, the whole reason for why the Prophet ﷺ was sent was to get us closer to God, get us closer to Allah. The Salah, 5 daily prayers from the age of maturity until death, is something that we have to focus on. Whether we're at work, on the motorway, wherever we might be, focus on the Salah. Another sign is that we prefer what the Prophet ﷺ wants for us over